show you get a dissertation started. So that all the formatting is already in place when you go to actually type the text or to copy and paste it in. So the first thing I'm going to do is update the margins because, at least where I work, we look to have 1.5 inch margins on the left, which will help with binding for the archival copies of the dissertations. We want it to apply to the whole document, so that's good. Everything else here looks great, so I'm going to go ahead and press OK. Now I notice the first thing is that we have it set on normal. Normal's good, but right now normal is a 10-point font and it's only at single spacing. That's not what we want for a dissertation. We want double spaced at 12-point font, but Times New Roman is still the font we want. We also want it to be indented to the 1/2 inch mark right here. Now I know a lot of people will press the tab mark to get there, and you can see here this is the tab setting I have on the paragraph style, so you can see what I'm doing. And this is a really typical way that people will start to format their dissertations. Another thing that's really old-fashioned, I don't see it a lot anymore, is to just press space until you get close. That is definitely not a good way to do it, but the best thing to do is use these triangles right here. This first triangle, we're going to go ahead and put the first line indent you can see there at the 1/2 inch mark. Now we have double spacing, we have 12-point font, and we have the 1/2 inch indent. So we're going to go ahead and right click on normal and press update normal to match selection. What this means is that all of our normal now is going to be what I just decided it was going to be. Let me go ahead and type in some text here. I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this to make this easier. One quick trick while I do this. Since you can see my paragraph mark, right now I have it selected. If I copy and paste like that, I just press Control-C, spacebar, paste. You can see how it presses enter at the end of each line. That's not what I want it to do, so I'm going to go ahead and undo all of that, redo that. And instead, when I copy, I'm only going to copy to the exclamation point. I'm going to go ahead and leave out the paragraph mark, press space. And now you see there's only one paragraph mark and we have a normal paragraph. The dissertations are a little different than regular documents. We need to have some headings in there, so let's go ahead and press enter here and come up here and make our first heading. Now since headings are centered, we don't want the first line indented to 1/2 inch. That's going to mess up the centering, so we're going to go ahead and pull that back to 0. Times New Roman 12 is still what I want, but to save me some time and typing effort, I'm going to go ahead in all caps just right now to begin with, so I don't have to worry about holding down shift or using the caps lock button. I want it to stay at 2-point and double spacing, but I'm also going to go here in the paragraph tab. I'm going to go under indents and spacing and add 12-point space afterwards. That'll add a total of 24 points, which will help separate the heading from the rest of the text. So I'm going to call this chapter 1. I'm going to go ahead and use what's called a line break here. This trick with doing the 5 spaces after the colon is something that I learned. Both the 5 spaces and the line break are something that will help us later when we create a table of contents. Right now you can't really tell the difference between having that turned off, turning it on, and then if I delete it, make it only colon, space, and enter. There's no difference in how this looks. It's just for the way that our table of contents will look later that we want it to look like that. So now we have a heading 1, but you can't see it here under the outline, which is a great thing to have, and our heading 1 here is still this blue, which is not what we want. So like we did with the regular paragraph, we're going to highlight this, go under heading 1, and click update to match selection. Now over here we can see that our heading is named, and you can see that I typed it in all lower cases even though it's showing up in upper. Now the nice thing about this heading is that when you press enter, it goes straight back to normal. It's not going to do another thing in the heading 1 section. But right now we don't want that. We're going to try and make a heading 2. So I'm going to go ahead and pull this over again, make it bold, center it, and that's all I'm going to do for the heading 2. Turabian style doesn't actually have a particular style for the headings. This is just the one that I've been doing, and since I've been doing it for about 3 years, it It's just easier for me to do the same one every time I do something. So anyway, this we're going to call heading 2. And again, it's not showing up on our headings yet, so we're going to go ahead and highlight it. Right-click on heading 2, update to match selection. Now that I've used heading 2, heading 3 shows up. We're going to go ahead and add that one as well. Another good one to have. Pull this over, italicize. Right, heading 3. And I'm really creative in my titles today. And update that one. Now there is one thing that I believe these headings are missing. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and highlight this again. Go under paragraph and look at the line and page breaks. We have widow orphan control turned on. Definitely always make sure that widow orphan control is turned on. That's what keeps one line from appearing by itself on the bottom of a page in a paragraph, or at the top of the page when it's not connected to the rest of the paragraph. But that isn't usually an issue with headings that are usually only one line long. What we care about is keep with next. What that means is that the heading will never show up by itself at the end of a page. It will always make sure it bumps down to the next one. So I'm going to go ahead and add that to all of these and update once again, even though you're not going to see a difference yet. Go to paragraph, keep with next. And once again for this one, but I forgot to update these, so let's update these last two here. And one of the other main things that you use besides regular paragraph is a block quote. So I'm going to be very creative with my block quote and just write this. Copy and paste until I have a nice long one. By the way, I highly recommend keyboard shortcuts. They save me so much time. But there are other ways for pasting them that, you know, with right-clicking or anything along those lines. But anyway, I have my block quote now, and we have something called no spacing. And that's a start for what we want for block quotes, but we want the whole thing to be pulled over. I have seen a lot of strange things for people trying to get it to look the way the block quote should look, which is pulling this one over here as well. I've seen tabs like this at the end of each line to pull it over. And that's well and good, but say I've finished typing and then I realize my margins are wrong and I actually needed to have 1.5 on both sides. Just, this probably never happens, but say that I'd kept it at 1 inch all the way around first. But anyway, when I change the margins, those tab stops are now not where I want them to be. Note that this block quote still looks like a block quote, and this one does not look like it did before. I'm going to go ahead and undo, so you can see how I've done that before, and then undo each of those tab stops. These little triangles up here I use all the time. They really are lifesavers. Now once we've finished the block quote, I'm going to go ahead and press enter and keep one more line like we're supposed to. Press enter again, and then just click on normal. And this paragraph now is going to be double spaced. There we go. So now we have just the basic format for how to do a dissertation. We have the three heading levels. Anything further than that, and I would probably just include maybe an inline block or bolded statement for a next heading level down, but I would not include it in the table of contents. That again is a preference choice. There really isn't much that Travian has to say about how that works. So the next thing that I want to do is go ahead and create a section break. A section break is going to give us the what we need between chapter 1, chapter 2, all of those. Under page layout here, under breaks, we want to do a section break that goes to the next page. Continuous ones I haven't found a very good use for yet. And the page break that some people will use doesn't actually change where page numbers go, which is what we'll do after we create the section break. So we have a new section break to start chapter 2. I'm going to go ahead, click on heading 1 here, type in chapter 2, page numbers, and having fun. I'm not sure about the having fun, but we'll see how that goes. So we have 2 different chapters now, but I need to make sure that I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this part so that we have more than one page in this first chapter here. There we go. Now we have, I think, 2 pages there. Because when we're formatting, we want the first page of a section to have the footer here on the bottom. But after that, we want it to be on the top in the right-hand corner instead of in the bottom in the center. So I've seen tutorials that actually tell you to add a section break at the end of the first page. And so let's go ahead and do that just to see what it looks like. There's your section break here. It doesn't really change anything here. We can delete that if we want to. And then for this section, we would add page number, bottom of the page in the center like that. And then this one we would say don't link to previous, delete that one. Link to previous means copy what we did in the last section. This is section 2, this is section 1. We don't want to link to previous in either of those, and this would show up in the top right. That's where we want our page numbers to go. Now, this is all well and good. It works, it's the way that I would want it to look, and it would count. This next section break again, I would unlink, delete that, because it's the beginning of a new page. I'd add it to the bottom, unlink, add another page number in here. As you can tell by the tone of my voice, this isn't really the best way to do it. So what we actually want to do, well, first of all, let me show you why this isn't the wrong way. So I've finished my dissertation, I've given it to my advisor, and she says everything looks good except that for this first paragraph. In this first paragraph, I actually want you to delete and start with the block quote. So I delete that, and all of a sudden my page break is up here, and I could have fit a lot more on that page. Or say she said that paragraph is all well and good, but she wants me to add another paragraph after it. So let me copy and paste that paragraph again, delete that extra. Well, now we have that same section break we had earlier is in the middle of the second page. That's not where we want it to be. So in order to just save a lot of headache and a lot of worry when you're trying to edit your dissertation later, I'm going to go ahead and press undo a lot. No, I'm not. I'm going to just come in here, delete this section break altogether. We don't want a section break there. Delete this extra paragraph that I'd created. Now, all of these first 3 pages are section 1, and then page 4 starts section 2. That's what we want it to look like. But if I just go in here and I type, see we have now an upper right heading on every page. That's not what we want either. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that from that first page, and just click this button right here, delete different first page. So now you can see this change from saying footer section 1 to saying first page footer section 1. That's exactly what we want it to do. Go to bottom of the page, add a page number in the center there. Now our header and footer for section 1 we do want to be right here in the top. And now when we go to chapter 2, page number's not on the top, it's right there on the bottom where we want it to be. So that's just a nice easy way to do that. I'm going to go ahead, add another section break here. This is a shortcut bar that I've made myself just by using this customized quick access toolbar. These are the ones that I happen to use the most. Technically I'd go under page layout, breaks, section breaks. I just use these out of habit. Anyway, for our last section I want to go ahead and look at how to create a bibliography. Now I know the formatting is actually a little weird for bibliography. They ask you to have the first line we want to be at 0. So let me go ahead and take some random text from our first chapter here. This is good, it goes into a second line. I'll take this, copy it, go down to our bibliography, use that, pretending like it's an entry. This is a great feature I'll probably go through at some point. At this point, I'll let it keep the source formatting. But what we know is that we want this to be indented by a ½ inch, not the first line, but every line after the first line. So we know that we can just press backspace here and it moves this triangle. That's great. But I've seen a lot of people who maybe they press enter here and then pull that one in that way, which again, if you have to go through and change something, maybe if I italicize this and then realize that I forgot to add the city for the publishing house, all of a sudden it's completely, that's not how I want it to look. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that and get rid of the paragraph mark. And all we have to do is move the second slider by itself right here. Take this, have it set to single spacing, and then I'm going to, instead of having to press return between every entry, I'm going to go ahead and add 12-point space between each line, which means that when I press enter, go ahead and do that, it leaves the space that we want it to leave. So this, every time you press enter, it keeps the same formatting. So when you enter your bibliography, it will continue to show exactly what you want it to show. Now one last thing before I finish this first tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and add another section break here so we can have our front matter. That was unnecessary. I'm going to go ahead and first unlink to previous really quick because we don't want it. Go to page number, format, start at 1. Because our front matter is going to use a different style. But right here, I want to go ahead and create a contents page. I don't want it to be listed as a heading because it seems silly to have the table of contents in the table of contents, but that's a personal preference choice in my opinion. So now I'm going to go ahead and go, I know a lot of people now are going to go, okay, what's my first section called? It's called Chapter 1, How to Format Your Dissertation. And then they're going to go through and press the period button until they get pretty close to the end of the page. Like, okay, I know that one's on page 1. Oops, too far. Better go back, delete that. There we go. So, I know I did that a lot when I was a kid, and then I'd go in there, and oh yeah, heading 2. I think that's also on page 1, so I'm going to go ahead and press period button a lot until I get to the end. Also on page 1. And that is how I see a lot of dissertations formatted. And again, if I go through and I change when I change the margins, or if the margins need changed, or if there's editing to be done, then those are going to get completely screwed up. And you can see right here, if I pull a straight line down, that those numbers don't line up. That always bothered me as a kid. I had no idea how to fix it. So we're going to leave that just for example. Go into references here, table of contents. I'm going to make an automatic one for now, just to show you how one would show up. I don't happen to like the extra contents button. And it looks like my contents ended up being a heading anyway. I'm going to call it normal, and then center it. So, I don't want that there. I'm going to delete it. You can see here, all the numbers line up. There's just one tab space here. But to me, even once I turn off all of those silly things and look at it, it's still just a little bit messy for the way that I like it. And again, there's no right way to make a table of contents, but the one that I'm going to make is just the way that I found it to look best. So I'm going to go under table of contents, and I'm going to do a custom one. I want it to show 3 levels, red line page numbers, that tab leader show the page numbers. Those are all things that I wanted to do. The first thing I'm going to do is make it single spaced. I think it just looks a little bit better single spaced, but we don't want the whole thing crowded. So I'm going to make sure it's all caps, that's great. Go to paragraph, 12 spacing before, that's great. And hanging, that's also, this is already set the way that I want it to be because I make custom table of contents a lot. So this is the way that I want it to look. Press OK there. Go to my second one, see if this is still set up the way I want it to be. I want it to be single spaced. Don't want it to be justified, we want it to be left. Don't need to mess with the font any further. We don't want the first line indented. We'll hang. So right now we have it indented in the first line by 1/4 inch and hanging by 0.5. I'll show you what that looks like in a minute. Make sure that we have the tab stop. This is what makes the page numbers line up correctly. So that's all good to go. And oh, you can see here, this pushes it in 1/4 inch from the margin here, but then another 1/4 inch is where anything that will fall into the second line would go. We're not going to see that in this because it's so small. And the heading 3, I like to have at 1/2 inch with no hanging or anything, no space before. Tabs would look good. And that reminds me, this one I actually do like to have a little bit of space before. Oh yeah, it's set. Okay. Press OK. Replace the selected table of contents, and this is how I like them to look. You can see a little bit more space here. Now, I was telling you earlier about how that line break actually means a lot. So let's go ahead and look at this. I'm going to delete that line break, put a non-breaking line, use a regular enter, and go back up to our table of contents and update it. Update the entire table. See now how that's fallen onto a second line? That, even though it's the same heading, that's what's wrong with, or not wrong with, but can make things a little more difficult. So I'm going to delete that, add back in my non-breaking line, update my table one more time, update the entire table. Now we have all the correct page numbers. Everything's on one line. You can see everything coming together with our 2 heading levels. We can go ahead and delete those because they don't look right. Delete this small. Okay. So yeah, that's basically how to set up your dissertation to start with. Edit this footer here because front matter will have the page numbers be in Roman numerals, lowercase. See here, we still have them back to normal. And yeah, that's how you can set up your dissertation before you even start, and it will just flow a lot easier without having to worry about the formatting and the headaches that it can cause as you go along.